Well, the man from Arkansas, he really wasn't from Arkansas. He was from Breeze, Illinois, and he went to Arkansas every week and brought up these fryers from there with big truckloads because he was a big chicken man. And so I knew him, and I thought, I wish I could do that, what he's doing. And I would go out every week, and I would get a new customer. I would go to every grocery store that Monday until I had a customer. And if he bought one box, I'd be tickled to death. And then the next week, I found another customer, and another customer, and then finally I got into the bigger branch of it, like a store that was a supermarket. And they bought maybe 10 or 15 boxes like Wessels. And then there was big restaurants that had all the chicken you can eat. And that was a big account. So I grew from nothing up into the spot where I was saving money. And I could buy a truck. We had a truck in the end. And I realized that this business was not for me because I could not handle the boxes. I could not do a lot of things that a woman would not do in this business. You didn't see women in these kind of businesses.
What, did you have any help unloading the trucks?
So then I had my dad help me at first, and in fact he helped me all the way through. But then I hired a couple, a man and a woman that could work continually, with the business, and he would deliver in the end. And that's the way it grew. Well, in the end, I ended up with $10,000. But all the time I was doing this business, I was looking for something else. And I would watch all the ads in the paper, and nothing turned up.
So what year was that? Do you remember how old you were?
I was probably in my middle 30s.
So, Dad, how much would $10,000 be worth today and from that time period? So that was 60 years ago.
It would be probably at least quadruple, I would say.
So it'd be about 50,000.
Yeah, maybe
40 to 50,000 in today's times.
Anyway, with all that, oh gosh, where was I?
So you were saying that you were looking in the paper. You were always.
Oh yeah, I would be looking in the paper for another kind of business.
Yes.
And I prayed. I always went to Our Lady of Snows and prayed to find this business. And I would just search and search. And finally, this laundry business, entrepreneurs, I saw it in the paper where they were putting in coin laundries. And that did not appeal to me either because I knew our washer was always breaking down. I thought, I don't want that. So one day I saw a Frigidaire coin laundry advertised, and I thought, well, Frigidaire's it's a good product. So I called them, and they came, and they took me down to East St. Louis to a coin laundry that was very, very successful. I mean, the people were jammed in there. And the man that owned it gave me all the information I needed to know. He just was really helpful. And so I was talking to the representative, and of course, he found the location for me in Belleville, and it was the first one in Belleville. And it was always very, very busy. It was open 24 hours, and it was busy 24 hours.
What services did you offer there?
Just washers and dryers.
And you had a fold service, right?
What?
A folding service.
Not them.
Oh, okay.
It was just washers. You brought your wash in and did it yourself.
Did you have to work 7 days a week?
And the thing is, when I talked to Heather, she said she prayed that she didn't care how much work she had to do just so she could make more money.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's the way I prayed. I prayed that I didn't care if I had to work 7 days a week, and that's exactly what I ended up doing. I prayed. I didn't care if I had to work 7 days a week, and that's exactly what the work was. I
Yeah.
was there every day, in and out.
Yeah.
And it was very successful. Pat can tell you that. It was, they stood in line at the beginning just to get a dryer because they weren't built for big crowds of people, so they had to stand in line and wait for dryers. And from that one, I bought another one, and from there I went to my last laundry, which I even expanded, and it was very successful.
How many units, how many washers and dryers did you have in your
I
biggest
don't know,
one?
maybe 50.
50
I would
washers?
think, yeah.
50
but-
washers and 50 dryers, or 50
no,
total?
50, that would be washers.
Right.
And then the dryers, I had probably about maybe 20.
20.
Two
And you
sides,
bought the
yeah.
building, right?
And then I bought the building, yeah.
And how much was the building when you bought it?
I think it was about 150,000.
And what, do you remember what year that was in?
No.
And so you bought the building for 150,000, and a lot of the money that you had to deal with was coins, right?
I built.
It was all
And
coins.
then when the kids went to college, those laundries put them through school.
Right.
You know.
And then it also has allowed you to support your grandchildren
Mm-hmm.
and all sorts of things.
Really, yeah.
Buy a home,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Everything. Okay, I'm going to pause.
But I don't know how much it was, but it wasn't.
You didn't spend it, though.
I didn't
So when your
spend
mom
it.
died, you
No, I
inherited.
didn't spend
She
it.
still
You
has
never
her-
spent
She
it.
still has her inheritance.
You never spent it.
No, I never spent
Never
it.
spent it.
No.
And so what are you saving the money for?
Right now,
Yeah.
I would say I was saving it for my children and grandchildren.
Okay, so you want to pass the money down,
Right. Hmm.
and that's important to you.
Yeah.
Okay. And what can you tell us about the town of Millstadt?
The town of Millstadt. Well, we lived in St. Louis. My parents were from Millstadt. And every Sunday in my life we went to Millstadt. Even the roads were, they weren't even made yet. They didn't have paved highways, and we went from St. Louis, of course, was all paved, but once we got into Illinois, we started getting into like oiled roads and mud roads, and especially Millstadt. They would, from the town out to the country, you had mud roads, and if it snowed or ice, well, we went regardless. And the families were big. My dad's family,
Your grandparents lived there.
that's my grandparents, my father's people lived in Millstadt, and they had 10 children. And my mother lived in the country, and they had 6 children. And my grandpa in the country sent my mother to college. She was the one he picked to be the teacher. And she went on the train to Normal, and then she went to Carbondale.
So what year would that have been in about?
Oh, gosh, well, she was a young woman.
She was a young woman, and so if you were born in
23.
1923, then it probably would have been around 1915
In the 19th.
or something when
Yeah.
she was going to college.
I would think.
Yeah.
And then when she did teach in one schoolhouse that was close to Grandma and Grandpa's farm, and if it snowed or anything, he would walk her across the fields to the school and maybe help her build the fire in the little stove that they had.
Yeah,
So that's the way it went.
very nice. Okay, I'm going to stop.
No, but then you can't get it all in on,
All in one setting.
no,
Yeah,
a lot of details that could be.
yeah.
But I will say that that my mother and father, coming from Millstadt, going to St. Louis, like his brothers and one sister, they all succeeded. Everyone succeeded.
And how old were your parents? How old did your parents live to?
How old when they died?
Yeah.
My dad was 70. He dropped over with a heart attack.
Okay.
And my mother was like, I think she was around 75. But she had high blood pressure all her life. And back then, they couldn't control it like they can now.
Yeah.
And then she had a stroke, and so that's what
Yeah.
caused her death.
And what about your brother?
My brother was killed by a train when he was 16,
And he, what town was that in?
St. Louis.
So where's he buried?
St. Louis,
Is he buried with your parents?
yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop the video for a second.
My mother's
Go ahead.
grandparents came from Germany. And on the mother's side was Jew and German. And on my father's side, I never did get the mother's, Grandma Bessie's bloodline, so I really don't know on her. I know on the father's side, he was German. But I don't know about Grandma Bessie. I should have looked into that.
So when you say German, is this the people from Alsace, Lorraine?
I'll say some right.
So sometimes it's German, sometimes it's French, depending on the time period.
Yeah,
So, but when they were living there, Dad, get out of her chair. When they were
There were a
living
lot
there,
of Jews
it was,
there.
and it was probably German.
German Jew.
Yeah. And so your dad's side was German, Jewish, and your mom's side was,
Well, I would say German Jew.
So all the same.
I really don't know about Engler, Grandpa. Well, that would not been it. My mother's mother was a Lang. That was her name.
yeah. So we don't know where the Langs came from.
The Langs came from Germany.
Okay, so everybody basically
Yeah,
came.
came from Germany.
So Kathy, is everybody German-ish coming down from Grandma Millie's side?
Seems that way out.
Okay. And what was TW's heritage?
I don't really know his heritage.
Okay.
I really don't.
Okay.
I know that he lived in Idabel, Oklahoma,
Yeah.
and that's all I
Yeah.
really know.
Okay. Well, Dad had the test done. Where's TW's lines come from?
His family came from England originally,
Uh-huh.
and probably something Irish as well, It was
Okay.
Irish, Scottish, English.
And
Okay.
it goes back to Vikings, remember?
Okay. Here, step out of the side real fast. So Dad thinks that he's always thought that he's Scottish, but there's no Scottish. There's no Scottish. This is there. He's just continuing to say this, but we know there's no Scottish, based on the
Well-
genealogy test he took, right?
I don't remember.
Dad.
But it's time for us to go, hon.